Hello everyone, this is Dr Bishal Gyawali from Queen's University, Kingston, Canada. I'm an associate professor in oncology and public health sciences. And today I'm very happy to introduce a series in Medscape Oncology called Skills Lab, Interpreting Clinical Research with Bishal Gyawali. As you all know, the importance of critical appraisal of literature is increasing more and more. And we have been discussing about how we are not properly trained in our fellowship program and post-fellowship on how to read clinical trials properly. There are so many ways in which we can misinterpret the results of the clinical trial, and that directly affects outcomes for our patients. So with collaboration with Medscape and Medscape Oncology, I'm going to launch a series on how to properly appraise clinical literature. And I think this is an important part of training that actually should have been a part of oncology fellowship training programs. But as we all know, we are not trained in that one particular domain that is the most important for our daily clinical practice. Our literature is flooded with new trial results everywhere. You go to conferences, there are several plenary abstracts presented, which will change your practice tomorrow. Every week in these topmost medical journals, we get flooded with new trial reports. And most of us actually rely on the conclusions that are written in those abstract slides or in the trial publication. And if the conclusion says it's a new standard of care, we take it as granted that it is the new standard of care because it was presented at this big meeting or it was published in this important journal. But I'm sorry to tell you that that's not usually the case. In fact, several studies, including some of my own, have shown the presence of important biases in these important abstract presentations or in the journal reports. So how do we tease that apart? So how can we rely on the conclusions? I think the best defense against this is to be an expert yourself. So I want we all to become an expert on interpreting clinical trials properly. And it's not a big ask. It might feel intimidating at first, but it's just a matter of learning a few basic principles and then applying it day-to-day life while reading new trial reports so that you hone those skills as you hone any other clinical skills. But I think this is one of the most important skills. As you know, I also run a column in Medscape called Common Sense in Oncology, in which I sometimes discuss some of these issues. And one of my latest columns was on interpretation of p-values and how even top experts in the world misinterpret p-values and claim that a drug with a small p-value is actually a meaningful drug, which is not the case. Therefore, I want you not to outsource clinical trial interpretation to experts. I want you to be an expert yourself. So I'm happy to announce this new video series in collaboration with Medscape, where we'll go through all the fundamental principles of interpretation of a clinical research well. So the first half of this series would focus on basic principles. We'll start with what are the types of clinical research, what are the types of clinical trials, and then we'll focus mainly on phase 3 clinical trial first. We'll start with basic principles of phase 3 clinical trials. We'll start with how to read the abstract and conflicts of interest, supplementary appendix, all those ancillary items. And then we'll focus on how to read a clinical trial report publication properly, how I read a clinical trial report. So we'll go through introduction and then methods. We'll particularly focus on several items inside the methods, such as randomization, blinding, control arm, endpoint choice, quality of life, how it was defined and measured. And we'll also discuss on issues such as how the trial was powered, whether it was an overpowered trial, whether it was underpowered, whether the trial was designed in a way to answer the question that it claims is answering. And we'll discuss the statistical analysis portion in detail. We know that we skip that portion all the time when reading a trial publication, but we'll try to make it more understandable and palatable to us. Then we'll move on to the results and we'll see how the results have been reported. Have they been reported properly and what inferences can we make from those results? And based on that, I don't think we need to read the conclusions anymore because we can draw our own conclusions after having all these skills. And once we are done with the phase 3 trial, then we can toss on some newer design trials such as non-inferiority design trials and how to interpret them. And there are seamless design trials, multi-arm, multi-stage trials. There is phase 2, phase 3 seamless trial design. Then we can move on to phase 2 trials. Then we'll go into phase 1 trial. And then finally, we can discuss the post-trial landscape in that the approval decisions, how do these regulatory policies work, and post-approval marketing phase, how the cancer economics work, how cancer policy works. And once we have covered these basic fundamental principles, then after that, you can think of it as completing the theory part of the training, and then we'll move on to the practical application part, in which we'll pick up specific trials that are being published in those contemporary times that are practice changing potentially, and then we'll dissect those trials using all these principles that we will have gained in the first half of the series. So you can think of it as a running journal club that we can do as and when new important trials are published, so that we can go through that trial report together and make inferences. So I'd like to welcome you all to this series.